And now we're happy to address any questions you have about data mining and predictive analytics. This is what we consider the free consulting segment of our webinar. Open access to the modeling agency's advanced analytic gurus, senior consultants Tony Rathburn and Scott Terry. Tony's going to try to return, but at this point he is not. So Scott and I will handle the questions for now. So each question you submit, it's going to receive multiple perspectives, at least from Scott and I, and hopefully Tony will be back in just a little bit. We have, like I say, just a single question. So this is your big chance to go ahead and pose any questions you'd like for us to address. Just enter them into the text field of the webinar panel, and I'll be pleased to read them for Scott or myself to respond. So the question we have right now is, what tools do you use for data selection, data preparation, and investigation, which I guess would also be exploration? This is asked by Shelby. Respectively, including the functions within a tool. And Scott, you know, I know you and Tony both have a lot of data preparation experience. This certainly ties into the segment that you presented, and you can certainly tie it back to that. I've unmuted you. I'm getting a pretty good echo. I'm not sure why. Not sure if you have a handset that you might be able to use, but it's gone away, so you must have done something. So thank you, Scott. So Shelby's question is, what tools do you use for data selection, data preparation, and investigation, respectively, including what functions are within a tool? And feel free to direct this any way that you'd like, because we often want to make sure that whatever they're doing isn't necessarily tool-focused, but that they have a great method to proceed with that's going to be tangible and effective.
Okay, Shelby, that's a great question. Can you hear me okay, by the way?
Yeah, you're coming through loud and clear now. Thanks.
Right.
Whatever adjustment you made, it was perfect.
All right, super duper. The question is an excellent question. It's a question we get asked quite often. Probably the best thing for me to say first is that a lot of emphasis is put on the tools themselves. But as has already been mentioned, the tools are really just tools. You know, they have no IQ in and of themselves. A lot of the tools we already have, we can employ. For example, I use Excel a lot in terms of data preparation. I may not use it for, I may not use the tool for ultimate modeling, but you know, there are a lot of tricks I've learned over time that helps me in terms of coding stuff that I need to do to prepare for a model or to prepare data. Certainly, you know, a fully integrated environment that will help you go through all the 6 steps is the ideal choice. And within those environments, you have the open source offerings as well as the more commercial offerings. Within the commercial offerings, the 2 800-pound gorillas in the room are always SAS and SPSS. There are a lot of other good packages that can be employed. And within the open source arena, which you may want to start out with, there are a lot of options. There's KNIME, there's RapidMiner, there's, of course, R, Python, if you're more interested, or if you have an additional interest in terms of systems and capabilities outside of data mining and predictive analytics. Weka is another one. All good choices, all fully integrated, and sometimes integrated with other packages.
Great response, very thorough. And I should mention that at least for the open source packages, we're going to be following up with an email that'll provide some resources of where to go, some great reading. They're all non-promotional, well, except for the fact that we like to point toward our own public courses. But aside from that, there's other resources that that are very helpful in getting started and what are the next steps. The only thing we don't do is really cite any commercial organizations to maintain our vendor neutrality. But aside from that, some of the open source packages that you mentioned, non-commercial, they'll be referenced, like KNIME and Weka and others will be referenced in that follow-up email. So those of you in the webinar, you'll receive those links. And those who just registered in order to get some resources, they'll be invited back to attend another live session. These links are only shared with those who came into the live event, because we want to encourage that the great polling interaction. And I've got to commend the group. As quiet as you are on the Q&A here, you've been phenomenal. in the polling, and we got great responses, great activity in the polling, and certainly commend you for sticking around for 90 minutes, which is kind of taboo for a webinar these days. You want to contain it to 90 minutes, but we have a lot to 60 minutes rather, but we have a lot to share, and we do like the interactivity of the Q&A session. So Will, thanks for your question. You asked me to elaborate on the difference between the courses Data Analytics for Action and Impact and Transforming Data to Decisions. Now, I'm going from memory here, but I think Transforming Data to Decisions may be the subtitle of the Data Analytics for Action and Impact course. Otherwise, I think that might have been a title in an earlier version of the class. They are the same class nonetheless. And so they are, fully related. One is either the Transforming Data to Decisions is either an earlier version or, like I say, it's a subtitle. So they are the same class. And so the difference between that course and the Predictive Analytics series is that in the Transforming Data to Decisions course, we're looking at general analytics before we get into predictive analytics. Some people like to have a better foundation. Even though it's not required, they like to have a better foundation of general analytics, more statistically based, or like logistic regression or standard regression before coming into the predictive analytics series. It does help the track a little bit better. And it's not just focused on statistics and math. It's really meant to reduce the void that often is apparent between the practitioner and leadership. They speak very different languages, and it's very helpful for practitioners to think more strategically and not just dive into the data, but if they don't have a very clear definition of the target for the analysis, that they should require to step back and talk to leadership a little bit further about not only what the target is, but how do they need the results to be deployed or explained or displayed, or is there a dashboard that will be helpful, and to talk to others in the organization that are going to contribute to or benefit from the analytic effort. So that's the difference of this class, of the Data Analytics for Action and Impact course, kind of the precursor to the Predictive Analytics series, is that it really helps analytic practitioners to think more strategically, and it's also intended for leaders who need to have a little bit more of a tactical foundation in order to be a little more effective at knowing how to ask for what they need from analytics. Otherwise, without that, we continue to do analytics simply for the sake of analytics. And there's so many organizations that are frustrated these days with their analytic departments that continue to toil away on data, and they come up with some interesting insights from time to time. But like I said in my introduction, if those insights aren't aligned with organizational objectives or the motivations of leadership, it's ultimately not going to be adopted. It's not going to be productive or impactful. And at the end of the day, it's not going to really justify the analytic practice. So that's what this course looks to remove, is that void or that area of dysfunction between practitioners and leadership, and give them a more purposeful way to collaborate toward effective results in analytics. So I appreciate the question, Will. Hopefully that answers. But yeah, the two questions, or the two versions of the training that you were asking about, they actually are the same course. And I'll have to go back. I don't have it in front of me. I can't pull up a web browser right now, but I think that the Transforming Data to Decisions is a subtitle to that same class. With that, with no other questions coming in, let me go ahead and do a bonus here, and we get some common questions that come in with every event. One common question is, do we record and distribute this event? We do not. As I was alluding to just a few minutes earlier, we like to encourage live participation. So those who did not attend, we invite them to attend at a future event. We always list out the next 2 or 3 that they can register for. Bring your questions in, and let's have a good, lively discussion. And so we will not record and distribute the event, but you can always come back if there's if you want to get a refresher on it, some reinforcement, come in with questions, see what the new polling results are. Come back to the webinar page and register for another production. And here's a question we had earlier that I think is helpful to everyone, because even those that don't have questions, they stick around for the Q&A because there's a lot of very helpful considerations to think about. And one is, how do you change the culture to include predictive modeling at an organization? Because it's one thing to arrive at an accurate model, but it's another thing to really have the analytics fully adopted within an organization. That's the far greater challenge, and I think one of the reasons why it's a greater challenge is because oftentimes the organization has great analytic practitioners. They hire very capable data scientists, and in my view, a data scientist is not necessarily an analytic lead. If you have scientist in your name, you follow very specific process and testing and validation. In my view, it's really a tactical position if you're going to have scientists in your name. And most times, those analytic practitioners don't just naturally don't have the soft skills necessarily, or even the motivation to go out and interview all of those who are going to take part or have a stake in the analytic results, or even what needs to be contributed to the analytic model development. And because of that, we end up with great models that are highly accurate, that at the end of the day, like I say, don't align with organizational motivations or are not understandable to leadership. So just like you see in this webinar, you may have seen the image for it. It's an upside down rocket on a launch pad. You end up with a very sophisticated piece of machinery that works exceedingly well, and that's your model with tremendous accuracy. And you'd be surprised to know just how many times organizations launch that beautiful rocket without a mission plan. And it seems trite to think that anybody would do that, but it happens all the time. And Scott, I'm going to unmute you in a moment to share your experiences along this line. But this goes along with the culture change, that if we can't talk to leadership, if we can't talk to others that, like I say, contribute to or benefit from the modeling effort, then we're not going to have the greatest decisioning that comes from it. Not all the decisioning is going to be data-driven. We need to interview the subject matter experts that understand some of the hard rules that come into decisioning that have nothing to do with scores from a predictive model, but have everything to do with hard decisions that have to be made either before or after the analytic model. And so the overall decision support system has to take both into account. Some of the subject matter experts' hard rules, as well as ways with which to act upon the model scores for the whole decision process. And then how's it going to be operationalized? We want to diffuse those bombs upstream and understand how this is going to work functionally once we deploy it. What's the environment in which it's going to work? How are the gears going to mesh? That's not something you want to look at after you've developed the model. And most data scientists are so tempted to just start with the data, the software, put them together. That works for a lot of other IT projects. But in predictive analytics, again, you'll come up with a more than adequate model. But I often give the analogy of it's like a race car. The data scientists are kind of the mechanics in the garage. They're tuning the engine. They're making it go faster. They're making the car run tremendously. But if we don't understand the rules of the race, then we're going to be driving off course at a higher rate of speed, and that's not going to get us anywhere at the end of the day. So that's really what the modeling agency's courses focus on. That's what our consulting focuses on, is ensuring that all those parts come together, including the team. And part of that is looking at the culture within the organization, because if leadership and the domain experts aren't going to make the mind shift to start peeling some of the fingers off the handlebars and allowing the data-driven decisioning to start taking place, why start developing these models in the first place? So that's part of what we want to investigate when we do a more comprehensive assessment of an organization. So Scott, I'm hogging the mic here. I apologize for that. But feel free to add anything to kind of the consideration of changing the culture in an organization to include predictive modeling and analytics, any other aspect, because it's such a broad topic. You can really pick anywhere in the spectrum that helps an organization to move from their gut level to data-driven and the benefits that they get from it.
Well, I think what I'll do is I'll try to be more concise, because it really gets to the point of the question. Nothing speaks like success. So if I were trying to change the culture, I wouldn't necessarily try to do it verbally or through presentations or anything like that. What I would do is, on my own time, I would take on a pilot project. Um, um, what we do begins with a business problem or a problem within the organization that we're working with, and we we prescribe um, an approach, a predictive analytics approach, to address that problem. So if you take on a pilot project and you can prove through training, testing, and validation that the project has some merits, generally you'll get some attention, especially if you quantify the potential impact of it.
Yeah, no, that's a great consideration. And I think the other motivation, you certainly do an internal pilot and show the promise of a project if it were deployed. And the other that I hear a lot is just the competitive threat. If you find ways in which others in your industry are making great strides, if there are some case summaries that show how others in your industry are excelling with analytics, that's a massive motivator to leadership, to not lose their competitive edge and understand, how to make this work. So that's a great point. Those are probably the top motivators. And I think just with us backfilling a couple of questions there, we've brought ourselves to the bottom of the hour. Hopefully these seated questions were helpful to the group as well. But at 12:30, we're going to draw this event to a close, and I'd certainly like to thank our attendees today for your sustained interest and your active participation in the polling, and Scott and Tony for your great segments, and Scott for running the Q&A with me here through to the end. And we're going to follow up shortly with that email that I promised with some resources and suggestions that will hopefully be useful to you from there. We hope you've offered permission for us to stay in touch through the modeling agency's newsletter, and that you'll consider joining us at a public training event soon. So make sure to register early to secure one of the few remaining very early bird 25% discount spaces for San Jose in December, or look ahead to Orlando in February, or Washington, D.C. in May if the timing and location work out better for you. And keep in mind that your colleagues can join you anytime for up to 30% off at the same event. Now, if you don't have a training or travel budget but would like the guidance of a seasoned mentor, you might be interested in the modeling agency's Escort on Call program. Escort on Call is essentially a retainer account that provides remote open access to a TMA senior consultant. Simply open up an Escort on Call account and you've instantly added a wealth of experience and capability to your existing bench without expanding payroll, administrating complicated contracts, or taking elevated risk on larger commitments. We'll get you the answers you want, guide you through it, show you how it's done, implement any data mining tasks you may wish to delegate, and then remain on call until the next time you need us. And meanwhile, when we're not actively working, you're not paying a dime. So a link to the Escort on Call description page will be among the resources included in the follow-up email. On behalf of myself, Scott, and Tony, thank you again for attending Data Mining Failure to Launch. Have a very pleasant afternoon and evening, and this brings the webinar broadcast to a close.